Hi guys, happy homebrew whatever. The topic for this week is yeast related again. It's about building a recipe around the yeast. And some background for this. I've used Windsor yeast from Lallemand, Danstar, one time before, and that yeast really did not ferment out as I hoped, and I've learned afterwards that it's a yeast that will leave a large portion of residual sugars, and I've read many threads on the internet when people are hating that yeast, but the yeast still sells, so I thought I really wanted to give it another go. So I started thinking, what could I do with a yeast that does not attenuate as great as I would like it to? And I started my recipe from there. First off, I will do a low ABV beer. When I do lower ABV beers, which I'm trying to learn, I tend to up the mash temperature and add a bit more specialty grains. But in this case, I thought that if I would do what I normally do with low ABV beers, it won't work for this yeast. So I added some dextrose to this recipe to further get it to ferment out a little bit better, and I mashed really low, and that combination was my idea. I decided to make a mild, and for this 23 liters recipe I used 1.1 kilograms of Munich, that's 30% of the grain bill, 1.1 Vienna malt, 30%. I used 300 grams of Meludium malt, that's 8.2%. 270 grams of Crystal 100, that's 7.3%. 250 grams of flaked oats, that's 6.8%, and 200 grams of chocolate malt, 5.5%, and 50 grams of roasted barley for color, it's 1.4%. And to that I added 400 grams of dextrose in the end of the boil. The roasted grains were added at the end of the mash. For hops, I did 10 grams of Magnum at 60 minutes, 20 grams of Fuggles at 15 minutes, 20 grams of Cascade at 1 minute, and 20 gram Cascade and 20 gram Fuggles each at 1 minute. Then I cooled this down and pitched the Windsor yeast. I mashed this at 60 degrees Celsius for 90 minutes. When I mash at lower temp, I do a little longer mash time. Then I did a mash out at 75 degrees Celsius for 50 minutes. During the mash out, I added the chocolate malt and the roasted barley. The OG of this was 1040. Beersmith calculated this to ferment to 1003, but I knew from using this yeast before that that number is gonna be very off. This actually fermented down to 1014, and we ended up with a ABV of 3.4. The only regret from this recipe were the added roasted barley, because it got a bit darker than I hoped for. And if you guessed it right, so it's the beer I'm drinking right now. So it's a bit darker than I hoped for, but otherwise from the color, I'm calling this experiment a success. And maybe it might not qualify for an experiment, but for me, having used this Windsor yeast one time before and failed with it, I made a porter and it only fermented out to 1020, 1021 or something like that. That might be okay for some of you, but I don't like my beers on the sweeter side. But when do a lower ABV beer, I like them better if they have some more sweetness than, I think 1010 or something like that might be a bit low for this style of beers. And what I will take from this beer is to think more about the yeast that I'm using, and what I can do to hopefully make the yeast make the beer that I want. You heard it before, brewers make wort and yeast makes beer. So I think looking at your yeast and the property of your yeast and building your recipe around the yeast you're using. The more we brew, the more we learn the different yeast strains. Try to not experiment with too many of them. I have some that I used over and over, and now I actually made a brew with a Windsor yeast that was a success. Like I said, if I were to do this again, I would take down the dark malts just a bit, and I could actually even have used some more crystal malts in this, because it's actually not sweet on the tongue at all. So I brewed a lot of beers with the VLP 001, and the next brew I'm gonna brew is my first time with the VLP 002, and that's a yeast with different properties than the 001. So from this experiment I'm gonna take with me to think more about what I can do for the 002 yeast in the recipe. Every day is a learning day. I hope that someone found this interesting, maybe just a small bit. I'm gonna end this video with some close-up video from this glass. Cheers, 17. Don't forget to subscribe and thumbs up the video. And I love your comment, guys. Cheers. Dr. Hans out.